This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The infection of 17 medics at a facility in Egypt underlines the importance of protecting health workers. Around the world, countries are implementing COVID-19 containment measures, but the numbers continue to rise. And in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson hospitalized for persistent COVID-19 symptoms. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. In business news, global oil prices fall after OPEC Plus meeting is called off. And in your sports, Zimbabwe's mixed martial arts star Themba Gorimbo all set to take on the world. Well, a two-week lockdown has taken effect in one of the municipalities in the DRC's capital, Kinshasa. The lockdown follows an increase in the spread of COVID-19, with confirmed cases now rising to 161. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa reports.
Kinshasa residents did their last-minute shopping before a lockdown took effect on Monday in the capital's central business district. The governor of Kinshasa announced a two-week lockdown in Gombe municipality to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Health experts say the area has recorded the highest number of confirmed cases, but some Congolese have expressed reservations about the prudence of imposing a partial lockdown in the city.
If they want to confine, they have to confine whole Kinshasa. That's being smart. So actually what they are doing to confine Gombe from tomorrow, I don't think it's going to sort out the problem.
Our leaders have decided to shut down only one area of the city to contain the coronavirus. We have friends and relatives who work in that area. They keep visiting us and traveling to other parts of the city. How can they stop the spread of the disease with such a strategy?
Last month, the government reversed its decision to put Kinshasa under a complete lockdown, fearing a rise in insecurity and a hike in the prices of basic commodities. The rise in COVID-19 cases in Kinshasa has led some Congolese to demand for mandatory testing.
The lockdown alone isn't enough. The government should also carry out tests to verify the number of people infected with the disease so that they can be treated early.
The shutdown in Gombe will last until the 20th of April. The government has only allowed a small number of essential staff to access Gombe during the two-week lockdown. Traders operating in the city center will have to relocate to other areas, but that may lead to an increase in crowds in other parts of Kinshasa, posing health risks to the communities there. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
In Egypt, 17 medical staff have been quarantined after testing positive for COVID-19. The infections were from Egypt's National Cancer Institute. Initial investigation showed that they may have come into contact with an infected child at the institute. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has ordered immediate coronavirus tests for all staff and medics at the institute. Authorities have identified 72 people who came in direct contact with the child. All of them have been quarantined. The institute has now been closed for 3 days to allow for disinfection of the facility. The center treats hundreds of cancer patients every day, raising fears that the virus could have spread widely. So far, Egypt has reported more than 1,000 cases and over 60 deaths. It's imposed a number of measures, including a nighttime curfew to help curb the spread of the virus. However, some health workers say more needs to be done to protect them. Well, for more on the situation in Egypt, we're now joined live by Adel El-Marouki, who is in Cairo. Thank you so much for joining us, Adel. Adel, has the cause of the infection of such a high number of health workers at the National Cancer Institute been confirmed yet?
Yes, basically the authorities have indicated that an initial case that infected was a young girl who came to the hospital accompanied with her parents, and she was infected with COVID-19. That's around late in March. And she has directly infected 2 nurses and a doctor that were in direct contact with her and have been personally treating her. But there have been accusations to the management of the Cancer Institute of concealing that information, which has allowed to the spread to what we're seeing now is 17 confirmed cases, and tests are continuing. There are about 800 personnel in the hospital so far that have been tested out of 1,000 test kits sent from Cairo University, which it overlooks that Cancer Institute. It's the biggest healthcare facility in Egypt and the Middle East, especially in the public sector that concerns with cancer patients. We're talking about 300,000 patients are estimated to be treated there every year. So huge number of people, and therefore it has been quite a shocking news and alarming to the standards that are ongoing to check for COVID-19, even beyond hospitals that are concerned with the virus.
Adele, well, the protection of health workers is a key concern around the world and in Africa. How is Egypt ensuring that medics are well protected? And also, just going back to the story, Adele, that something like this doesn't happen again?
Well, unfortunately, it is happening, and not just in the Cancer Institute. Before it, there were other cases reported in several other hospitals. Dozens of healthcare facilities have been shut down by the authorities for not abiding to the government and health ministry regulations for taking preventive measures against COVID-19. So the government is inspecting, but this is a country of 100 million, and therefore it's quite difficult to have a strong grip over all aspects. But the government has sent its instructions to all medical healthcare facilities. Whenever it's proven that a medical facility violates, it goes and shuts it down. But so far, according to the doctors syndicate here in Egypt, at least 30 medical staff have been confirmed with COVID-19 in several hospitals. Yesterday at night, Egypt Air Hospital, which provides medical services for employees of Egypt Air, the local airline, and also public services, have sent a message to all staff and pilots warning them about going to the hospital, as they have confirmed 1 case of COVID-19 there as well. So there are quite of concerns about what is the magnitude and the preventive measures, whether they're enough or not. But there are preventive measures. Yesterday, I personally went to the Cancer Institute, and there I've seen that they are, the basic preventive measures are there, but it's still not clear about how the infection have went so far. But according to investigations that are initially ongoing, there is a blame of concealing the information, and that's what has led to the outbreak reaching 17 medical staff, doctors and nurses in 1 hospital.
Thank you so much for that update, Adele. Adele Marouchi joining us live there from Cairo. Well, in Cote d'Ivoire, protesters have brought down a partially built makeshift facility meant to house COVID-19 patients. The incident happened in the neighborhood of Yopougon in Abidjan on Sunday night. More than 100 Ivorians ransacked the building and destroyed the unfinished structure. They also set fire to market stalls on the road leading to the structure. Authorities in Abidjan have been building mobile hospital units in the city. They include a 140-bed facility in the Anyama General Hospital and a 160-bed structure in the Yopougon University Hospital. The country has so far recorded more than 260 coronavirus patients.
We are here at the BAE complex, where they are putting up something for the coronavirus patients right in the middle of the Ivorian population. We are in Yopougon. The population is opposed to it.
A former Libyan Prime Minister Mahmoud Jibril has died of COVID-19. Jibril abandoned Muammar Gaddafi to become Libya's rebel prime minister during the 2011 revolution. Jibril was interim leader of Libya until the country held its first free elections in 2012. He died in a private hospital in Cairo, where he was being treated since contracting the virus late last month. Ethiopians have been asked to prepare for any incidents caused by the spread of COVID-19. Concern has been raised among the country's leadership as they report that there have been a lack of behavioral changes since the pandemic hit. The country has recorded its first death of a 60-year-old woman who had been receiving treatment since March the 31st. 43 cases have been reported with 4 recoveries. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is calling on Ethiopians to assist in providing food and shelter to the needy now and in the coming weeks.
Because we failed to see positive behavioral change in people, our concerns and fears have been mounted. I would like to propose 2 challenges. First, we ask one family to share a meal a day to another family in need. We can call this meal sharing, and we have to prepare in this area. The government cannot simply provide food to people house to house. If the virus attacks significantly, a family shouldn't die of hunger. Second, universities are now closed and you are home. I ask of you to focus on research on the way out of this pandemic. I also ask people to continue informing and educating our people until we pass these dangerous times.
Meanwhile, in Kenya, some worshippers have been meeting despite a government order banning public gatherings in order to celebrate Palm Sunday. Pastor Gladys Maloba hosted members of the Nabi Christian Church of East Africa at her home in the Kibera slums of Nairobi. Kenya has also put in place a nighttime curfew from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. as part of stringent measures against the outbreak. More than 140 infections have been detected and 4 people have died from the disease in the country.
I have urged my congregation to protect their kids and themselves because prevention is better than cure. We prayed for all those who are in hospitals, prayed for the whole country as the whole world has been shaken by the coronavirus. This virus has even shaken the church.
We cannot congregate in churches to pray, and that is why today we decided to gather here at our pastor's home to pray for our country and for those affected by this pandemic that is becoming a problem all over Africa.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is in hospital for tests in what Downing Street describes as a precautionary step. Johnson has been showing persistent symptoms of COVID-19 10 days after testing positive for the virus. The 55-year-old became the first leader of a major power to announce that he had tested positive. He's been in isolation at a flat in Downing Street. Meanwhile, Britain has confirmed over 47,000 cases and nearly 5,000 deaths. In the wake of this, Queen Elizabeth II has made an extremely rare broadcast to the nation. In her speech, she called upon Britons to show solidarity as they battle the disease.
I'm speaking to you at what I know is an increasingly challenging time. A time of disruption in the life of our country. A disruption that has brought grief to some, financial difficulties to many, and enormous changes to the daily lives of us all. Across the Commonwealth and around the world, we have seen heartwarming stories of people coming together to help others, be it through delivering food parcels and medicines, checking on neighbours, or converting businesses to help the relief effort. Today, once again, many will feel a painful sense of separation from their loved ones. But now as then, we know deep down that it is the right thing to do. While we have faced challenges before, this one is different. This time we join with all nations across the globe in a common endeavour, using the great advances of science and our instinctive compassion to heal. We will succeed, and that success will belong to every one of us.
Well, with more from the UK, let's now cross to London, where Nicole Johnston is standing by with the latest on that story. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us. As we just reported, Prime Minister Johnson has been hospitalized following persistent COVID-19 symptoms. What is the latest on his condition, Nicole?
Well, the government says that these are routine tests, that he wasn't rushed to hospital in any emergency, that it was well planned, but he is suffering from these ongoing symptoms, particularly a high fever. Boris Johnson released a video message on Friday night warning the public not to take advantage of good weather on the weekend and to stay indoors, but he looked very unwell, during that video piece. Now, for now, he is still leading the country. He says that he is able to do it via video link, but this morning the Cabinet and department heads will be meeting, and that will be chaired by the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab. In the UK, there's no Deputy Prime Minister to take over in the event that Boris Johnson becomes too unwell to lead the country, but he has announced that Dominic Raab would step into his position in the event that the Prime Minister became too sick. But he's not the only senior member of the government to come down with coronavirus. The Health Secretary has also had it, as well as the country's senior medical advisor, and now Boris Johnson's wife also has coronavirus and is at home self-isolating.
Nicole, the UK is said to be a week away from reaching peak infection. How prepared is it for that?
It really appears as though the UK has been trying to play catch-up for quite some time. It wants to get at least 30,000 ventilators, ideally 43,000. There's only 8,000 in the country and another 8,000 on order. In terms of intensive care beds, if you compare the UK with Germany, the UK has 7 intensive care beds per 100,000 people. Germany has 30. So in many respects, it looks as though the UK wasn't well prepared. It's now trying to get there, but it's faced heavy criticism for a shortage of testing, especially for those National Health Service workers, the doctors and nurses on the front line. It's managed to increase this to 10,000 per day. But again, in comparison with Germany, they're doing 50 to 70,000 per day. And the UK has also been heavily criticised for failing in the area of contact tracing. The World Health Organization has said you need to test and you need to trace. The UK has been criticised for failing to do that in the initial days of the outbreak, leading to this sort of widespread outbreak across the UK. Last week they opened a hospital, a field hospital with 4,000 beds here in London, and they're trying to open similar hospitals in convention centres across the country, you know, from the south to the north, field hospitals, and as well as morgues that have room for hundreds of bodies, showing just what a serious state the UK is in as it prepares for the peak of this virus over the next sort of week to 10 days.
Thank you so much for that update, Nicole. Nicole Johnson speaking to us live from London. Well, let's move on to the United States now, where COVID-19 deaths in the U.S. have topped 1,200 in the last 24 hours alone. Health officials warn that the next 2 weeks will be crucial in the nation's fight against the pandemic. While President Donald Trump says the situation is under control, top health expert Dr. Anthony Fauci has a different view. CGTN's Toby Muse has more.
The White House is preparing Americans for a sharp spike in the death toll due to the coronavirus, with one official comparing it to the horrific terrorist attacks in New York City 2 decades ago.
It's tragically fitting that we're talking at the beginning of Holy Week, because this is going to be the hardest and the saddest week of most Americans' lives, quite frankly. This is going to be our Pearl Harbor moment, our 9/11 moment, only it's not going to be localized. It's going to be happening all over the country, and I want America to understand that.
The White House anticipates a death toll in the U.S. of between 100,000 and 240,000 Americans. The Surgeon General said the mitigation efforts of the population, including in many places staying at home and so-called social distancing, was helping to curb the spread of the coronavirus. He urged the 9 states that do not have statewide stay-at-home orders to implement some short-term mechanism to help curb the spread of the coronavirus, if only temporarily to free up parts of the healthcare system. In recent weeks, the message from President Donald Trump in his daily press briefings has been that the White House has this situation under control. But Sunday, we heard another version of that from Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
We are struggling to get it under control, and that's the issue that's at hand right now. The thing that's important is that what you see is increases in new cases, which then start to flatten out. But the end result of that, you don't see for days, if not weeks, down the pike.
Further, Dr. Fauci worried that the coronavirus could become seasonal. He said that there was a very small chance that the coronavirus would be completely contained or completely eliminated. So once this crisis dies down, it could come roaring back later this year or next year, and that pattern could be repeated until a vaccine is found. Toby Muse, CGTN, Washington.
Well, it's been a long 3 months for the city of Wuhan. But with the city's transportation again moving and the lockdown ending, the city is just about back on its feet. It's also a time for the city's hard-working volunteers to look back on what most would call a job well done. Here's CGTN's Zhao Yunfei with more.
With the city of Wuhan coming out of lockdown, volunteers are now reflecting on how they kept the city running. Wang Zhixiang and his team of 17 worked tirelessly to deliver supplies for more than 70 days.
It's so worthwhile to see the smiling faces of medical workers. As long as our contributions can relieve the pandemic, it's worth it. When we gave the flowers to the medical workers, it was a priceless moment. It just feels so good when you can pass love on to each other.
The team began with sending medical supplies. As issues of protective gear shortages were resolved, they started to deliver food and snacks. The donations the team gathered from around the world benefited more than 1,700 hospitals and communities. Team members say their solidarity kept them committed.
I am a local Wuhan resident. If I do not support my city, I will feel guilty. I hope that I can help relieve public anxiety. I have to contribute as much as I can.
Wang Zhixiang is an entrepreneur, he says. In the past, he focused on profit and business ties, but the pandemic changed his views.
We've survived the pandemic in Wuhan. I feel there's nothing more important than what we've done. During the pandemic, we only thought about one thing: how to help others, how to help others, and how to help others. We thought about how we could thank those donors, how we could give back to those who have helped us.
Wang says when the pandemic ends, he will continue pursuing his dreams with more respect and care from others. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Wuhan, Hubei Province.
It's time now for us to take a short break and return. More news making headlines, including Sudan peace talks resume in Juba after a 1-week break.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, peace talks meant to end violence in Sudan have resumed in Juba after being suspended for a week following the death of Sudan's defense minister. The mediators say negotiations will continue, but without face-to-face meetings to try and prevent the spread of the COVID-19. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
A coalition of 9 rebel groups and Khartoum representatives are continuing with talks to try to find lasting peace in Sudan. Sudan's transitional government says ending conflict in the country is its priority. South Sudan is mediating in the talks. The mediators say there will be no face-to-face meetings as a measure to avoid the spread of the COVID-19. It says it is using video conferencing technology to try and push the peace process forward.
We have organized the talks in such a way that the Sudan's government delegation will be in Khartoum. The opposition parties are here in Juba. Communication will be done electronically. We will also have Skype conference calls with the parties.
The peace process has brought together all political and military groups that fought the regime of the former President Omar al-Bashir. So far, the parties have agreed on a ceasefire, humanitarian access, land issues, and the resettlement of those displaced by the conflicts. Sudan's peace talks began in South Sudan in October last year, aiming to end conflicts in Darfur, Blue Nile, and southern Kordofan, and ensure a halt to violence in the country. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Well, still in South Sudan, 8 agencies running rehabilitation centers that support landmine victims say they'll stop operations to avoid the spread of the new coronavirus. The move leaves beneficiaries of the centers with an uncertain future. People in South Sudan face danger from many mines left in the ground during the country's civil war. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
Yokwes Deng was hit by a landmine in 2011 as she was walking to her neighbor's house. The mother of 2 lost her legs. She has since suffered from depression. It is only this rehabilitation center that has given her hope.
February of every year, I come to this center to get a replacement for my artificial leg. I'm now doing business, selling tea in the market, and I'm also taking care of my children thanks to this artificial leg.
The United Nations Mine Action Service, or UNMAS, in South Sudan says it has so far destroyed more than 1 million explosive devices and 4.2 million bullets. The UN says it will take many years to complete the removal of landmines and other unexploded ordnances. Landmine victims are found across South Sudan.
South Sudan has only 3 rehabilitation centers supported by International Committee of the Red Cross that produce artificial limbs and support landmine victims.
The 6-year civil war, which ended in February this year, halted the mining in most parts of South Sudan. That led to the maiming of more people.
The number of the patients are on rise. So mainly because we have different causes of amputations, and beside the amputations also we have like traumatic cases. We have the gunshot, which is really the biggest number within, and we have the landmine.
The International Committee of the Red Cross says its operations to support landmine victims are being hampered by measures to contain the coronavirus.
Due to the coronavirus now, we have stopped bringing patients from other centers because we are avoiding the crowded. So we are trying by any means, those who have already been in the center, we are trying by any means to send them back. And that is why our technicians, they are very busy this time in order to finish with the devices of the patient so that they can be booked to go back.
The partial lockdown in South Sudan has denied many landmine victims access to rehabilitation centers. Yokwes Deng is from the northern part of South Sudan. She is now stuck in Juba until the partial lockdown is lifted. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
We move to Russia now, where a man in the country's central Ryazan region has shot and killed 5 people for talking loudly at night under his windows. Well, it's time now for us to take a short break. and return. We continue with more news, including global oil prices fall after OPEC Plus meeting is called off. And Nigerian pet shop sees boom in rabbit sales during the coronavirus pandemic.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. It's time now for your business news. Oil prices slipped more than $1 a barrel on Monday. This after the world's top producers delayed a meeting to discuss output cuts that could partly alleviate oversupply in global markets as the new coronavirus pandemic pummels demand. Brent crude slipped close to $30 a barrel in early trade and was at $32.82, down $1.29 or 3.8%. West Texas Intermediate crude fell $1.66 to $26.68 a barrel after earlier touching a low of $25.28. Late last week, prices surged with U.S. and Brent contracts posting their largest ever weekly percentage gains due to hopes that OPEC and its allies would strike a deal to cut crude supply worldwide by at least 10 million barrels per day. A study by the African Union shows that about 20 million jobs are at risk in Africa as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. Most of the continent's economies are projected to shrink this year due to the impact. Before the pandemic, continent-wide GDP growth had been projected by the African Development Bank to reach 3.4% this year. Under what the AU deems their realistic scenario, Africa's economy will shrink 0.8%. The pessimistic scenarios say there would be a 1.1% dip. Up to 15% of foreign direct investments could disappear. Meanwhile, the impact on employment will be dramatic, with African governments losing up to 20 to 30% of their fiscal revenue. African economies are already facing an impending global economic downturn, plummeting oil and commodity prices, as well as an imploding tourism sector. The South African arm of British American Tobacco has urged the government to reconsider its ban on cigarette sales during the nationwide coronavirus lockdown. South Africa has imposed some of the toughest anti-COVID-19 measures on the continent. These include a 21-day stay-at-home lockdown that started last week Friday. During the lockdown, essential services, retailers and petrol station forecourt stores are not allowed to sell alcohol or cigarettes. The government has justified the ban on studies showing that the smoking can make people more susceptible to serious complications from a coronavirus infection. BAT South Africa said it supported decisive measures taken by the government, but warned that the ban on cigarette sales could jeopardize the fight to contain the virus. Well, from foreign trade to manufacturing, industries across the globe are being hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. This also includes niche markets like bicycle manufacturing. CGTN's Amar Khan caught up with one American industry leader to hear how they're weathering the storm.
Here at this folding bike factory in southern China's Guangdong province, assembly line staff are back to work. The factory belongs to DaHan, a global leader in folding bike technology headquartered in California. And much like many other factories and warehouses, the past 3 months have been difficult, though a recent recovery has brought back a sense of stability.
Overall, since work resumed and up to now, our workforce has been quite stable. The local and district committees carry out regular checks and we also maintain strict requirements on prevention controls. It hasn't really affected our foreign and domestic orders. It hasn't had a big impact on us.
With nearly 40 years of experience and having become the world's top designer and producer of foldable bikes, DaHan has built up a sustainable business. But in the times of a pandemic, it seems that no industry would be completely spared from the economic impacts.
Well, almost all of China was locked down. So that includes our suppliers and ourselves. Nothing can be done for more than 2 months, almost 3 months. The factory beginning with maybe half the staff, and then increasing now to about maybe 80% of the staffs. So we are getting back to normal probably by the end of next month.
And on the financial side of things, the pains were felt as well, with the company suffering sizable losses.
I think we suffered between everything, maybe 10-15 million RMB.
But even despite operational and financial obstacles, Dahan has seen an overwhelmingly positive rebound. It's perhaps a credit to their ability to set industry standards and develop cutting-edge technology.
Our business has picked up a lot in the month of March. So especially in online sales, more than 50%. Okay, offline we are still higher than last year same period.
Maintaining a positive yet realistic outlook is something Han says he'll keep doing, and there's a lot to look forward to. In recent years, the company has developed partnership programs that have enabled other manufacturers to co-brand, share patented technology, and work in tandem. But before all of that gets back on track, getting through the current situation remains the top priority. Omar Khan, CGTN, Shenzhen.
Egypt's and Sudan's electricity grids were officially connected on Friday with an initial capacity of 60 megawatts. The extension of the grid to Sudan's northern regions was completed with testing as part of efforts to expand power supply. The line was completed in April last year with a length of 100 kilometers in Egypt and 70 kilometers in Sudan. The first phase of connectivity aims to provide Sudan with a capacity of up to 70 megawatts, increasing to 300 megawatts in the second phase after the upgrade of some Sudanese power stations. Egypt has rapidly expanded its power generation in recent years and has been looking to export surplus electricity to neighboring countries. Businesses around the world are being hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. In Nigeria, many establishments remain closed as a lockdown imposed by the government takes effect. But one firm says businesses in Bunnies is booming. A pet shop is seeing its business thrive as people look for company during the lockdown in Africa's biggest city, Lagos. CGTN's Alexandria Majala has more.
27-year-old Sandra Dozier works as a Nigerian oil merchant. The closure of her workplace weeks ago saw her purchase a bunny from an online pet store.
My family and I got bored of just being just us at home. We wanted someone that would be there to, play with and just mess around with.
While many businesses in Nigeria are closed due to the outbreak of the new coronavirus, the pet business is booming. Sales have peaked for online businesses as demand for pet companionship skyrocketed during the global pandemic now threatening Lagos, Africa's most populated city.
Just like the FMC goods, you have your season. I can say the present situation had given Rabbitry its season of sales. The increase is much because people want to stay with something they can reckon with. The rabbit, being an intelligent animal, fits in this space.
All businesses. On March 29th, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari announced the ban of movement in Lagos and the country's capital Abuja for 14 days in an attempt to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Health experts are concerned about a potential widespread outbreak in Nigeria, which has a population of over 200 million people and a poor public health system. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Time for us to take a short break and return. More news, including South Africa places homeless people in shelters to protect them from the new coronavirus.
The volcanic island of Reunion has a rich and diverse cultural heritage. Rapid modernization over recent years has, however, taken its toll. Social problems are rife, and the younger generation has become disconnected from its historical roots. Stefan Tarif is an activist and filmmaker who aims to restore dignity and pride to the people of his island. Working in both theatre and film, his work confronts the difficulties experienced by the local people and celebrates reunion at the same time.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
Well, South Africa's Gauteng province is struggling to cope with the high numbers of homeless people. They've been moved off the streets and placed in temporary shelters to protect them against COVID-19 in line with President Cyril Ramaphosa's call. CRTN's Julie Shire brings us that report.
It was a scramble to find shelters for tens of thousands living on the streets. The public donations of money and food dried up when South Africa's 21-day quarantine started. Provisions have been made for homeless people, but many are still on the streets, surviving on the little that they can find, while most South Africans are locked indoors.
I don't have a place where can I sleep. Like during the day, if I've got a place, I can sleep. So I sleep even at the park or on the spa.
As winter rolls in, social workers fear the homeless population will be at a higher risk of contracting COVID-19.
They always got perennial coughs because they get cold on the street. We're heading into winter, so we're heading into the flu season with pneumonia and everything else that's likely to happen. You know, if you're on the streets, you're likely to take to alcohol or drugs, so that also further decreases your immune system.
In Pretoria, more than 2,000 were forcibly taken off the streets and crowded into a stadium without enough food, tents or toilets.
We don't have even the right precautions to follow. There's no self-distancing. We have not even been given sanitizers. We don't know anything. The food that we are eating is below the standards that we are even at the streets when I'm digging inside of the dustbin.
This thing, they say it's a virus, that corona thing. But we never bath, 8 days, no bathing. No gloves, no mask. What if one person is sick here? We're going to be sick, all of us. All of us. And we never even got tested for this virus. It was better when we were sleeping in the street, because in the street we don't sleep with so many people.
We've been kidnapped here. We've been kidnapped here. They are bringing us those blankets that they cover furniture for. These blankets are for furniture. It's not for a human being. If you can inhale these things that are coming here, we are already sick.
Authorities say they are trying to cope with larger than expected numbers.
For now, we've given them temporary accommodation. What we've done, we've established a center where they're screened first, and on the basis of the nature of their health, then we distribute them to various centers. But we've got temporary shelters, we've got permanent shelters. We're looking at the backup being schools and churches.
The goal is to keep the homeless safe from COVID-19, but so far no one here has been tested, and the plan of being moved to shelters is taking too long. Julie Shara, CGTN, Pretoria, South Africa.
In Tanzania, restaurants in Dar es Salaam are offering incentives to their customers to opt for home deliveries as opposed to walk-ins. This in a bid to aid social distancing rules to prevent the spread of the COVID-19.
With lesser amount. So we have put some favorable discounts, example on delivery orders, and also we have increased the number of working hours for the delivery orders till 10 p.m. We have done that so that to encourage our customers to stay at home and get the food at their doorsteps.
I really love eating out at restaurants, but I prefer food delivered to me because it distances me from the coronavirus, and I feel safe because I can get the same food I get there at home.
In the early days of the outbreak, thousands of medical workers from around China traveled to Wuhan to help local hospitals. One of them was a nurse called Zhao Yingming. 67 days later, she's returned safely to her home in Sichuan province, and now her husband has a promise to keep. And across the country, citizens are keen to make sure he does. Chui Huao has that story.
This was from Zhao Yingming's husband as his wife left for Wuhan 67 days ago. The nurse traveled with her colleagues from southwest China's Sichuan province to the front line in the battle against the coronavirus in January. Her husband, Jiang Haojun, hated to say goodbye.
my natural instinct just doesn't want her to go.
But he wanted even more to see his wife win the battle and come back safely. During their days apart, Jiang kept his promise, taking good care of their family and their son. And people online were keen to supervise him and make sure he was doing a good job.
People in Sichuan mean what they say. I'm a man of my word.
On Friday, April 3rd, 49 medical workers who had assisted in Wuhan returned home, and Zhao Yingming was one of them. Holding a bunch of pink roses, Jiang was waiting for her with their 4-year-old son.
I'm so excited, too excited to get a word out. I'm afraid I won't be able to stop myself crying.
Zhao has fulfilled her promise to come back. Now her husband must complete a year of housework. But for him, that would surely be the sweetest thing in the world. And with millions of selfless people like Zhao, the disease will eventually be defeated. Cui Huiyao, CGTN.
Well, your sports news is coming up after the break. Here's what you can expect. Zimbabwe's mixed martial arts star Themba Gorimbo all set to take on the world.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
It's time now for your sport news. FIFA is getting ready to deal with complaints and appeals over wage cuts for players, producing guidelines for clubs and football bodies looking to cut costs during the stoppage caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The issue of pay cuts for players has exploded as a major